Hello, good day everyone. I am Abdullah Mustafa and today we are going to discuss about conflict. So first of all, conflict is a process that begins when one party perceives that another party has negatively affected or is about to negatively affect something that the first party cares about. So basically, conflict is a process na kung saan yung one party perceives that another party has a negative effect to something that they care about. So that's the definition of conflict. However, conflict has no shortage definition. So there can be a more or other definition of conflict because there can also be a multiple causes of conflict. So next, the idea that conflict is perception. Okay, so the idea of conflict is perception basically means that conflict it arises when the parties are aware of the conflict. So it means that if no one is aware of conflict, then there is no conflict at all. Okay, so next we have different views of conflict. We have the traditional view and we have the interactionist view of conflict. Okay, so first we have the traditional view of conflict, the belief that all conflict is harmful and must be avoided. So this view thinks that conflict is something that an organization must avoid because it can ruin the organization or it can result into malfunction or can ruin the function of the organization. On the other hand, another view is the interactionist view of conflict. It states that it believes that the conflict is not only a positive force in a group, but also an absolute necessity for a group to perform effectively. So this view believes that conflict has something or can bring positive effect to an organization. Let's proceed about the types of conflict. The first one is functional conflict. It is a conflict that supports the goal of the group and improves its performance. Okay, so this type of conflict is that it helps the organization to function even more, like it can bring positive impact to an organization. The next one is the dysfunctional conflict. It is a conflict that hinders group performance. So it's like an opposite of the functional because this type of conflict can bring negative effect to an organization or can hinder its performance. Next is the task conflict. It is a conflict that a group can face or can encounter while doing their task. And then the relationship conflict. It is a conflict that talks about the relationship of the people in an organization. So that's the relationship conflict. And the last one is the process conflict. It states that it is a conflict that over how work gets done. Okay, so this conflict is a conflict that can be encountered while in the process of achieving the goal of a certain organization or a group. Okay, next, let's proceed to the conflict processes. Okay, so there is actually a process of conflict. We have 5 stages. We have the stage 1, which is the potential opposition or incomparability. The stage 2 is the cognition and personalization and so on. So now let's proceed about stage 1, the potential opposition or incompatibility. Okay, so this stage is dito na start yung mga konting mga disagreements or mga opposition about the ideas or mga suggestions ng mga tao in an organization. Nagkakaroon sila ng mga disagreements in this stage. Okay, so it has 3 elements. It has communication, structural, and personal variable. So communication, conflict happens when messages are unclear, misunderstood, or overloaded. Okay, so communication can give rise to a conflict when there is a misunderstanding or may mga unclear sa pag-disseminate or pag-convey mo ng message that could somehow offend other people. So with that, it can give rise to a conflict. Okay, so that's why it's very important to have a proper communication in an organization to avoid conflict. The next one is the structure. The structure, conflict often comes from organizational structure, such as specialized roles, unclear responsibilities, different goals, and etc. Okay, so structure, of course, an organization, it has a structure or different position of the people. Okay, so those different people from different position in an organization, of course, they have different roles. And then somehow there can be a misunderstanding about their roles, or there can be a comparison about their jobs, their reward system, and all. So that can give rise to a conflict also. And the last one is the personal variables. Individual traits like personality, emotions, and values influence how people interact. Okay, so personal values is it's like it's something that within you, that for example your characteristics, your traits as a person, that can somehow give rise to a conflict. Kasi syempre, it's something that within you that can give rise to a conflict. Now let's proceed about the stage 2, or the cognition and personalization. Okay, so it has two elements, the perceived conflict and the felt conflict. So for the perceived conflict, awareness by one or more parties of the existence of conditions that create opportunities for conflict to arise. Okay, so perceived conflict, it is a stage that both parties can already perceive that there is a conflict between them. So they can already perceive about the conflict, and it can give an opportunity for conflict to arise. And then next, the felt conflict. It is an emotional involvement in a conflict that creates anxiety, tenseness, frustration, or hostility. So felt conflict is a point, or it is a stage that both parties have already felt that there is a conflict between them. It is an emotional involvement, or somehow it can lead or can create them anxiety and frustration, because they can already feel the conflict between them. So that's the stage 2 of conflict process. Now let's proceed about the stage 3, which is the intention. So for the intention, it has 5 elements. It has competing, collaborating, compromising, avoiding, and accommodating. So first, let's talk about competing. So competing, it is a desire to satisfy one's interests regardless of the impact of the other party to the conflict. Okay, so competing is a stage where one party prioritizes their own interests without even minding or without considering what could be its effect to other party, because they are basically competing to other party. Next is the collaborating. So it is a situation in which the parties to a conflict each desire to satisfy fully the concerns of all parties. So collaborating is where both parties are willing to collaborate, or to their desire is to satisfy both the interests of both parties. And then the third one is the compromising. It is a situation in which each party to a conflict is willing to give up something. Okay, so compromising is both parties are willing to give up something in order to fix or to address the conflict or the issue. Next, we have the avoiding. It is a desire to withdraw from or suppress a conflict. So avoiding is a stage that a one party or even two parties is parang mas prefer na lang nila to avoid or to suppress a conflict. And then the last one is the accommodating. It is the willingness of one party in a conflict to place opponent's interest above his or her own. So accommodating basically means that it is when one party is willing to adjust or give chance to other party, or mas prefer na lang nila na mas maging i-place above yung interest ng other party rather than their own. So that's accommodating. So next, let's proceed to stage 4, which is the behavior. So when most people think of conflict situation, they tend to focus on stage 4 or the behavior, because this is where conflicts become visible. Okay, so sa behavior, this is the stage na kung saan yung conflict between two parties are already visible, because yung both parties are already doing something because there is a conflict between them, or acting something. For instance, there could be a verbal attack, or even worse, a physical attack. So that's why in this stage the conflict is already visible. Okay, so next we have actually here a conflict intensity continuum. We have here the first one, of course we have here the levels of conflict. Okay, so we have here first minor disagreements, and then when it gets worse, it can overt questioning or challenging of others, challenging ideas, and then it can also evolve into assertive verbal attacks, like verbal attacks towards other party, and if it gets worse, it can go to threats, where both parties give threats to one another, and then it can also lead to aggressive physical attacks, or even worse, it can overt efforts to destroy the other party. So that's the level of conflict. So next, let's proceed to conflict management. So conflict management, the use of resolution and stimulation techniques to achieve the desired level of conflict. Okay, so conflict management basically means that this is the techniques, or these are the ways in which a manager or someone in an organization can help to mitigate or prevent a conflict, or to manage the conflict properly. Okay, so we have here conflict management techniques. So we have here in the box. So the first one is the problem solving, face-to-face meeting of the conflicting parties, in which they will be going to have a face-to-face meeting to handle or to address the issue or the conflict. And then the next one, they can also do a superordinate goals, in which they will make a goal that could make everyone feel like united, like it needs everyone's support or everyone's help to achieve that goal. So those are the things, and there are actually like there are more here, but those are the things or the techniques that a manager can do in order to reduce or to mitigate a conflict. So these are the techniques to help them mitigate the conflict. And then here comes, we have the last stage, which is the stage 5, the outcomes. So after a conflict, of course, there would always be an outcome of it. Okay, so for the stage 5, we have two outcomes. We could have two outcomes. We have functional outcomes and we have dysfunctional outcomes. So functional outcomes, it shows that conflict is not always harmful. So functional outcomes basically means that somehow conflict is not always harmful because it can bring positive effect to an organization, or it can improve the function of an organization. It can make the organization function even well, or even improve the function of an organization. So functional outcomes is an outcome that after an organization, after the conflict, the organization have improved. And then the dysfunctional outcome is an opposite of functional outcome, because this functional outcome states that it explains how excessive a poor managed conflict harms group performance. Okay, so dysfunctional outcomes is it brings harm. A conflict brings harm to an organization, or even worse, it can ruin the organization, or it can lead to malfunction, or magiging ruin yung pag-function ng organization. So basically means this functional outcome basically means that the conflict has, if it has affected the organization negatively. So that will be all for the conflict. Now let's proceed about the next topic.
So, we have already talked about what is conflict, and now we're going to tackle what is negotiation. So, come to think of it, negotiation can actually help resolve conflict. So, what really is negotiation? According to the book of Organizational Behavior by Stephen P. Robbins and Timothy A. Judge, it explains that negotiation is a process in which two or more parties exchange goods or services and attempts to agree on the certain exchange rate for them. Negotiation happens frequently in organizations. Even in small or informal situations, it is not only about winning something, but also about maintaining relationship, fairness, and ethical behavior, especially when people will continue working together. So as I have mentioned earlier, that negotiation can help resolve conflict in a ways that, for example, there are two co-workers that both want the same day off. So the conflict is that both cannot take the same day off because only one staff member is allowed to be absent. But then, since they will try to negotiate, they talk and agree that one will take that day off while the other will take another day. So, in order to negotiate, they try to make things fair. So, we come up with something that's called bargaining. And bargaining, there are two strategies for bargaining. We have distributive bargaining and the integrative bargaining. Firstly, let's tackle what's distributive bargaining. So, distributive bargaining is a negotiation that seeks to divide up a fixed amount of resources, or a win-to-lose situation. It focuses on who gets the bigger share of the fixed pie. So, what is fixed pie? Fixed pie is the belief that there is only a set amount of goods or services to be divided up between the parties. For example, a market price negotiation where a customer negotiates with a vendor for a discount, trying to pay less while the seller tries to earn more. So as you can see, in distributive bargaining, there's always someone that has to be higher than someone else, or like they are more in favor of the situation. So now let's tackle what is integrative bargaining. Integrative bargaining is a negotiation that seeks one or more settlements that can create a win-win solution. It focuses on cooperation to find a solution that benefits both parties instead of dividing a fixed pie. The parties try to expand the pie so both sides gain. So it's more like fairness. For example, in a business partnership deal, two companies negotiate a partnership where one provides technology and the other provides distribution. Both earn more than they would alone. So magkakaroon ng teammate altogether or teamwork. So to sum it all up, integrative bargaining is more on fairness, where things or two parties or more are having an equal agreement, while sa distributive bargaining naman, kailangan someone is in favor, like win to lose. However, sa interrogative naman is win-win. So, how do negotiation usually starts? Firstly, we need to prepare and to plan. Second, definition of ground rules. Third is clarification and justification. Fourth is bargaining and problem solving. And lastly, the closure and implementation. So, what does this all do, or what's with all these stages ba? So here are certain types of negotiation process. We have preparation and planning, which is to help negotiators understand the conflict, set clear goals, analyze the other party's interests, and develop strategies to achieve the best possible outcome. So, diba, as usual, we try to prepare and plan. Dapat we need to be more ready to start negotiating. Second is definition and ground rules. So, ito siya nag-establish, it establishes the rules and procedures for how the negotiation will be conducted. It helps both parties agree on the process before discussing the main issues. So, there's a need of an agreement dito sa second. This stage clarifies who will negotiate, where and when the negotiation will happen, and what rules will guide the discussion. So, diba, after they start to plan now, we need to another step to realize or to have a foundation kung paano ba or ano ba yung mga certain rules before starting yung negotiation. So, third is the clarification and justification. The clarification and justification stage allows both parties to explain and support their initial demands after exchanging proposals. It helps each side better understand the reasons, interests, and evidence behind the other party's position. So, dito ba na nagsa-start kung ano ba yung nagbe-benefit sa isa't isa, or where they start to ask questions kung ano nga ba talaga yung need nila in order to come up a certain agreement. This stage also focuses on sharing information and explaining viewpoints, not necessarily arguing, diba? So, they'll just share what are their thoughts o kung paano ba nila nabe-benefit yung isa't isa in order to negotiate. For the fourth one, we have the bargaining and problem solving. It is the essence of the negotiation process. It is the actual give and take in trying to hash out an agreement. This is where both parties will undoubtedly need to make concessions. So in this process, they will try to proceed on putting adjustments, just like para lang masettle yung certain agreement. So, after all the processes ngayon, for the fifth, the last one, we have the closure and implementation. So, it is the final stage of negotiation where both parties formalize the agreement and decide how it will be carried and monitored. This step ensures that the discussion made during negotiation are clearly documented and properly implemented. So, for example, tapos na lahat. So, dito sa final stage na to, ito na yung closure stage kung saan baka magkakaroon na ng contract or possible magkakaroon na nga ng contract. So, for example, a company negotiates with a supplier for materials. They agree on price, quantity, and delivery schedule. All done na yun. So, the supplier then delivers the material according to the agreed schedule while the company pays according to the payment terms. So, ito na yung proper execution nung negotiation process. So, dito na mapafinalize lahat. So, after discussing all the steps, now let us tackle about individual differences in negotiation effectiveness. Firstly, we have personality trait in negotiation. Personality traits can influence how people negotiate, but they only weakly predict negotiation success. This means personality may affect negotiating style, but anyone can still learn to negotiate effectively. Next thing that will affect negotiation is our moods, emotion in negotiation, which can influence how people behave and perform in negotiations. The effect depends on the type of negotiation and the negotiator power or position. So, for example, I ask a proposal to the manager and the manager is in a good mood. Then maybe they be more open to listen and consider kung ano yung request ko, which can lead to a friendlier discussion. However, kung negative naman ang mood ng manager, it's either stress or angry siya, they may become less flexible and reject the proposal quickly kasi they'll think na we are wasting time. So that's how mood and emotion can somehow affect negotiation. Next is the culture in negotiations. So, culture influences how people communicate, share information, trust others, and behave during negotiations. Different cultures may use different negotiation styles, which can affect the outcomes. There is also a gender differences in negotiation, which researchers shows that men and women do not significantly differ in negotiating style, but gender can slightly affect negotiation outcomes due to social expectations and stereotypes. So you might be wondering, what if the negotiators will not agree on a certain agreement? So we have the so-called third-party negotiators or third-party negotiations. So this occurs when two sides cannot reach an agreement through direct negotiations and need help from a neutral person to resolve the conflict. A third party helps the disputing parties find a solution without being directly involved in the conflict. So firstly, we have the mediator, which is a neutral third party who facilitates a negotiated solution by using reasoning, persuasion, and suggestion for alternatives. For example, two employees disagree on work responsibilities. A mediator helps them talk it through and reach a mutual agreement. So, the mediator does not make the final decision, but instead guides the discussion so both parties can reach a voluntary agreement. So, their main role is to reduce tension, improve communication, and help both sides cooperate. So, the next is the arbitrator, which is a third party to a negotiation who has the authority to dictate an agreement. For example, in labor disputes, an arbitrator decides on wage issues if both sides cannot agree. So arbitrator is that someone that both sides needs to follow. Arbitration is usually used when two parties cannot resolve the conflict through negotiation or mediation, so both sides agree beforehand that they will accept the arbitrator's decision, so he has or she has the final say. Lastly, we have the conciliator, which is a trusted third party who provides an informal communication link between the negotiator and the opponent. For example, if two departments refuse to meet directly, a conciliator may pass message and encourage discussion. So, kumbaga, ang conciliator is the one that connects two parties to communicate. He is or she is the link. Unlike an arbitrator, the conciliator does not make decision, and unlike a mediator, they may focus more on building communication and trust between the sides. For example, nagkaroon ng tampuhan or disagreement yung two parties, siya yung magiging bridge to connect them all together and to start talking or to negotiate again. So that's all for today, and thank you for listening. I hope that you will try and learn to negotiate more effectively in the future. Thank you.